Evening everyone, welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 10 of the Case King Pro Series. That is right, we are entering the final quarter of this fantastic 12-round championship, and in the closing stages of this incredible season, we are seeing a titanic fight building up in the championship. The likes of Luke Whitehead, George Boothby, two of Veloce's and ACC's best offerings going toe-to-toe at the moment in the standings, and this could once again be another pivotal race in terms of that back and forth between those drivers. Last week we had 90 minutes of Silverstone where Grant Karekas ended up coming out on top of that one after what was a fantastic series of strategic decisions. We saw the weather, the typical British weather, playing into effect around that circuit, and it was the young Lithuanian who was able to master those conditions, make the right calls when it counted, and see himself climb back through the field in the closing stages and bring home a victory for himself. So an incredible series of battles that we had at that circuit, and I have no doubt whatsoever that Suzuka is once again going to be an incredible circuit for this championship. We always have the drama, we have the adrenaline, we have the busyness, the action, and sometimes even the calamities on the circuit, and this legendary layout is certainly going to provide us with that. I have no doubt whatsoever. Big thank you once again for all of the support on this channel over the last few weeks. It's been an incredible escalation of followers, viewers, and just wonderful to have you all enjoying this championship. And we have 3 rounds left to go, and Suzuka is going to be a very good one indeed. And speaking of this circuit, let's have a bit of a gander at exactly what this one holds. 18 turns of motorsport historic goodness, and the opening corner never ceases to amaze me that the very ambitious naming system of first corner. Turn 1 leaving nothing to the imagination, but don't let that fool you. It is a formidable, mighty, high-commitment corner, and we'll be putting these GT3 cars and our best drivers on the platform to the test, winding your way through those mighty S's as you then start to begin your ascent uphill through Dunlop Curve, the 2 Degners, and then into that hairpin. Potentially some overtaking opportunities into there. Then you get to the peak of the circuit around Spoon Curve. You go, gotta set out that exit and then maximize your straight line speed down the back straight, and then heading into 130 are a tricky corner in certain conditions, and also on the opening lap as well, particularly if you're in a Mercedes. You might not have too many of those running around in the field this evening, but it has proven to be quite a scary one for that type of car. And it's such a fantastic circuit, not just because it is a pure thoroughbred racing circuit and has that kind of hardcore feel to it, but also the fact that it has such a dynamic range of corners, straight line sections, and everything that you could pack into a circuit. It really does open up a lot of opportunities for side-by-side battling, slipstreaming, and some great overtaking opportunities as well. And when the weather does hit this circuit, it of course adds that extra little element of spice that we did see at Silverstone last week. So it could be an interesting one for our drivers to be tackling this evening. They are having their final bits of practice at the moment. We'll be making our way over into that and seeing how they get on for this evening's action. As we always talk about just before the race, there are those final few elements of approach that you can look to take. You can either look to try to optimize your qualifying position by getting in those final few laps around the circuit, dialing in that 1 lap pace, or you can look to try to get yourself set in terms of race performance and make sure that you are confident with the car that you have underneath you in race trim. And it's such a tricky one to sometimes get the balance of, because it very much can kind of go back and forth as to which way is actually going to benefit you in the long run. Qualifying, obviously inherently, the further up the order that you start, fundamentally, generally the better. But it's not everything. And this circuit is going to have very heavy tyre wear, particularly on that front left is going to be suffering quite a bit around here. So that's definitely a tyre that you want to be managing. The front right is also going to tend to suffer. It's just, you know, there's a lot of high-speed corners, so you want to make sure if you've got a car that's going to give you that longevity of pace rather than just being particularly good over the course of 1 lap. And it opens up opportunities for the undercuts, overcut strategies. It's going to be a very interesting one this evening, but it does mean that these final few moments can be crucial for our drivers depending on how they are going to get on for this evening's action. So we're making our way over into a session in just a second when I finish sorting out the last bits and pieces and seeing how our drivers get on. Of course, as always in the Pro Series, we have some of the very best drivers on the platform that are competing this evening. And also some other names returning to the series as well. I'm sure there'll be some familiar names in there to you. Of course, as well as also a lot of our newcomers. We saw quite a few kind of newcomers to the top split of the Pro Series last week at Silverstone, and they did a pretty solid job. And a lot of those drivers returning this week as well to see what they can deliver. So just a handful of minutes left on the clock in this final practice session for drivers to get themselves dialed in and ready to go. And we can see right now, well, I was actually going to say Zach Duran at the top of the timing sheet, but Jacob Osterman, of course, a man that took a little bit of time to take his first victory in the Case King Pro Series, but it was somewhat of an inevitability of when the ITB racing driver would get it, because he has been showing fine form all season long and is solidly the first man into the 59s, maybe even looking to get into the 58s in due course. And looking at that leaderboard, very, very competitive. Chris, someone, I think that was Jacob Shaber, just having a little bit of exploration into the gravel. And Suzuka is one of those circuits, it's so unforgiving. You know, it's not quite, you know, it hasn't got the dangers of a street circuit where you have barriers in very close proximity to you at all times. But what it does have is it very much has the threat of, you know, sections of corners that can go wrong very, very quickly and have big, big consequences. You've got gravel traps on the exits of a lot of these corners. You've got corners where there's such constant changes of direction, the S's especially. They have to be so mindful of weight transfer, especially when the tyres are cold, beginning of the stint, beginning of the race, heavy on fuel as well. If you get yourself a little bit offline or you get a bit of an oversteer moment, something like that in the middle of the corner, the way that affects you in the next series of apexes could be very, very difficult to manage indeed, and it really showcases the strengths and weaknesses of cars around here. You have the McLaren, tends to be pretty good in the back straights because it should be able to run relatively low downforce, I believe, around here. Maybe not quite the kind of Spa, Imola levels of what we can see this car look to do, but it should kind of be in a fairly reasonable spot. Speaking of which, of those McLarens, George Boothby gets himself to top of the time sheets on a 58.8, so the first man to do that. Of course, he sits P2 in the standings and is looking to move his way up and closer to his teammate. Now, I said there may not be too many Mercedes on this grid, and Moritz Lerner, of course, having come out of his racing commitments for the year, as everyone looks to wrap up and have a bit of a winter break, that he returns to the series. The mouse driver will be wielding this Mercedes AMG GT3 car around here, and that's going to be really interesting because this Mercedes, especially in the hands of Moritz, has been exceptionally quick at the times we have seen it in the top splits of this championship, but it is a tricky car to set up and dial in pace for. And it's been a bit back and forth in terms of pace as well around this circuit in the past. In certain BOPs, certain physics, it's been a very competitive one. Other times, not so much. And certainly a tricky one that has been presented for this corner in particular, 130R. Just the kind of the balance of the way that you've had to set up this car to get that change of direction, particularly before it had its aero rework. It was a tricky one to master, so it'd be really interesting to see how Moritz gets on with that, because that'll be a very good benchmark of what that car is able to achieve. I say we have Mr. Carpet in the chat, which unfortunately I do believe means that we may not have a Bentley in the field unless the likes of Sam Foch is still in the server as well. I'm having a little bit of a look for him up and down the grid, but unfortunately I can't see him, so I don't think that we are in fact going to have a Bentley in the field tonight. So major disappointment for all the Boatley lovers, but Timu supporting in the chat, and of course has been doing some pretty wonderful things with that lovely Bentley during the course of the season. And if you're wondering maybe why have we had a Bentley over the course of this season, bit of a weird one to have a top split of the Pro Series, well, that of course was the contribution from a lot of you and the rest of the community in setting up our custom BOP for this season, and it has been fantastic at bringing the grid closer together than ever and allowing such a range of car choices and really being able to see a dynamic and a sense of unpredictability going from round to round as to who's going to be topping the timing sheets and who is going to be in a good position to win each round, which keeps us on our toes every single week. And it's going to be a very interesting one. And apparently, the custom BOP can only do so much because around this circuit, maybe not quite lending itself to the strengths of that Bentley. Perhaps not too surprising in the grand scheme of things as a car that lacks quite a bit of rear traction and stability. It's a very fun one to flick around. But in those S's especially, it's going to burn out those rear tyres, I imagine, fairly quickly. So practice is over and done with, and qualifying is getting underway. And I believe it is going to be Lewis Rotors who is going to lead them away for the opening laps of this qualifying session as everyone starts to barrel out very quickly onto the grid. And I'll tell you what, the wonderful thing about this time of year as drivers kind of release themselves from their various other commitments and they make their way over to championships like this, it means that we have a star-studded field once again. We have the likes of Lewis Rotors, Statsenko, Groneveld joining us once again. Of course, we have Iamolo, Walsingham, Osterman, some of your familiar names. Moritz Lerner, we talked about Juknavicius, young Lithuanian. I believe he has just joined the Veloce Academy for ACC that's recently launched. An incredible project over there. And another very young, talented driver, the likes of Marco Schada, rejoined the field. Of course, our staple American Jonathan Clifford, although he does have now a compatriot in the server as well in the hands of Zach Duran. Tinko van der Velde, of course, who's been with us during the course of the season. Tariq Adam as well, very fast driver. Good to see that name amongst us once again. And who else do we have in the server? And of course, there is a Bastian Richter, who is another one of our resident Mercedes drivers. So it'll be really interesting to see how he gets on this evening as well. Of course, the Unicorns of Love driver. So it's going to be a mighty, mighty grid of cars this evening. And I cannot wait to see how this 60 minutes of Suzuka plays out. But we have a 15-minute session of qualifying to get through first. And we'll be hopping on board with Lewis Rotors in just a moment to see what he can do. Of course, this man has been a little bit of a dark horse coming into the championship, I must admit, at least for me personally. Hadn't seen him too much in kind of top split racing on ACC, but he has been a force to be reckoned with over the course of this season, and this whole ITB racing team has fundamentally been in an exceptionally strong position all season long. So we'll see what the German driver can do as we head on board for the first lap around Suzuka for Season 12. Lewis Rotors taking that McLaren 720S Evo down the start-finish straight and heading into that mighty but not so mightily named first corner of Turn 1. Transport your braking point and entry. Start to make your way down the gears. Take a little bit of curve on the left-hand side for winding your way in towards the apex of Turn 2. A little bit of correction mid-corner and then using all of that AstroTurf and exit curve to the left-hand side now. S's, very important to pace yourself through here. Don't be too eager in some of these mid-corner sections because you need to set up the next apex as well. Go for a bit of a double entry through his final right-hander, keeping to the right-hand side of the circuit so that you can open up Dunlop curve and then carry that momentum. Be careful that grass on the right-hand side. It will suck you over into that gravel very, very quickly. Now into the first deck, the big commitment here. And McLaren looking a little bit unsettled. Use all of the AstroTurf on the left-hand side as you flick your way through second deck there and under the bridge. Very unique layout to this circuit, having the figure of 8 now into the hairpin. He goes, make your way over to the right-hand side of the circuit as best as you can. Straighten up the braking on the entry and on the power, and that McLaren starts to unleash all its horsepower as he climbs up the hill. And seeing what this McLaren can do, of course, great mid-corner speed, a lot of downforce on board this platform through Spoon Curve. Got to pace yourself through here as well. Really want to treat it as one corner, and you see a lot of corrections from the German drivers. Going to compromise his exit down in towards 130 yards. Going to be losing a little bit of time here, but that McLaren should be able to regain a bit of momentum over some of its competitors now. 130 yard flat through here, I'm sure. No hesitation. I spoke a little bit too soon there. No hesitation, apart from the fact he was looking to go a little bit wide as a save invalidating the lap. He lifts out and sort of takes a chunk of curb through the Casio triangle, and then as he makes his way towards the line, taking a bit of a short line, but I think he may go for a second lap here. It's Lewis Rota setting the benchmark for the first lap of the session. He's got Morris Lerner right on his tail behind him, and as they cross the line, there's a 58.4 for Lewis Rota's, but he did invalidate the time in the end. In actual fact, it'd be his teammate Jacob Osterman that goes to the top of the time. She's almost into the 57s, and it's Luke Whitehead, the championship leader. That Porsche, a car that's going to be mightily interesting around this circuit. It's going to be epic in the corners, the S's, Casio Triangle, and of course Luke Whitehead. He is absolutely a demon with this car. He will extract the maximum, I have no doubt. But he is going to be suffering a little bit in terms of straight line speed. Of course, the 992 Porsche, not as much of a weakness for this car as we saw for the previous generation. But it's still something that he will be very much aware of. He'll want to start from pole position so that he can try to use all of that car's cornering potential to get himself away from the rest of the field in the opening stages. So qualifying for that car especially could be mightily important, as we see. Look at that shot. Lamborghinis, Porsches, and every car that you can possibly imagine heading up the hill and seeing what he can achieve. Is already 2/10 up on his previous lap time. Jacob Osterman and George Boothby joining him at the top of the timing sheets. Boothby up by a 1/10 of a second as well. He is only on the entry in towards turn 3, so definitely opportunities for him as cars making their way through as S's. What a fantastic series of shots there, but we will go and have a look back. Bastian Richter gets himself up into P6 for the number 35 car, and don't let that number plate fool you. If you're familiar with the LFM ranking system, the numbers in the server correspond to each driver's relative elo on the LFM platform. So the higher the number, the lower the skill rating. However, in the case of Bastian Richter, Uknavicius as well, I can tell you now, oh my goodness, snap oversteer for Luke Whitehead. He's still 3/10 of a second up on his previous lap time. Make it 4 as he heads through the Casio Triangle, trying to unleash everything that Flat 6 has to offer. A little bit of a compromise line though as he exits the final sequence. It's still going to be a big lap time for the British driver. First man into the 57s by a big margin, and it's a 57.7 for the Veloce Esports number 3 car. Uknavicius gets himself up into P4, and Lewis Rotas also improves in the ITV Racing McLaren to get into P3. And as Timu there, a little bit of insight from one of the fellow drivers of the Case King Pro Series top split. Porsche qualifying pace looking absolutely insane, and you'd have to say, even by Luke Whitehead's mighty standards, that 3/10 of a second margin, you would have to agree. It does certainly suggest that. Tinko van der Velde, good lap from him in the BMW, another manufacturer inside of that top 5. We have Porsche, McLaren, BMW, McLaren, and Aston Martin in the hands of the BS Plus competition driver Niels Naert, of course, a driver that has taken the BMW in this series for a number of seasons, as George Boothby is second man into the 57s, but he's still a couple of tenths away from his teammate, of course his championship rival at this point. But it's fantastic to see so many different manufacturers at the top end of the standings. In actual fact, we can have a little bit of a gander at that as we look on the leaderboard on the left-hand side. Bastian Richter gets the Mercedes. Thank you, Bastian. Wonderfully timed there to see the German outfit in towards that top 10, splitting the McLarens of Boothby and Osterman. Of course, the McLaren's looking very quick. It's been a quick car ever since it joined the world of ACC, as Valentin Barry, then the first of the Ferraris, just outside of the top 10 as it stands. We've got Marco Schada in the Honda as well. Fantastic to see that car in the server. Look at that. That is the Yeet Esports livery, a very distinct and well-loved livery in the community. And the number 11 car going very well as it stands at the moment, and seeing what he can do. And that's a car that's typically tended to be absolutely monstrous in a straight line, so that could open up some good overtaking opportunities in the race. Need to have a look at this man though, as one of the Lamborghinis gets it all wrong on the exit of the second Degner. But Bastian Richter, 2 to 3/10 of a second up. Niels Naert improves to a 58.027, gets himself into P3. But this man right now looking to challenge towards that front row. 2/10 up in the Mercedes Unicorns of Love driver. Of course, mighty amount of talent. Korekka's finding time as well, and Korekka goes out in P3, 57.9 from last week's race winner, but still quarter of a second away from his teammate at the front of the pack. 6 minutes on the clock, though, for all of this to change. And Bastian Richter going very quickly. 3/10 now for the Mercedes driver. How does he fare into 130R qualifying trim for number 35? Oh, that was good commitment through there. Not shying away from the exit curb whatsoever. He's got a little bit of traffic in front of him. As he's gone way too deep. In actual fact, carrying such good momentum through 130R. Gets it all wrong into Casio Triangle. Maybe a little bit distracted by the McLaren ahead of him. And Bastian Richter, we know then he's got the pace for the 57s. And it was looking like it was going to be a good time. But in the end, he will drop down to P5 for the time being and have to go out once more. Let's see who else is improving at the moment. We've got Paul Lobmeyer in the number 13 car. Lobmeyer, fantastic growth from him on the LFM platform. Has gone from kind of last season dabbling at the tail end of the top 40 to being able to really push this Porsche and extract great pace out of it in this custom BOP, a car and driver combo that has really started to thrive and is certainly looking to see if he can improve his way further inside the top 20, maybe get himself a top 15 starting position. We've got big improvements further down the order as well. Tobias Gronewold in another one of the Mercedes. There we go. We'll pick him up, the next of the Unicorns Love drivers, and he is 2.1 seconds up on his previous lap time. Of course, not massively representative of a benchmark that we have had from him so far. So we'll see what the number 22 car can do. We saw his teammate not too long ago of Richter get it wrong in towards Casio Triangle. Hopefully won't commentator curse the fellow German. Let's see what he can do. Carry a lot of momentum as he heads downhill. We've got Santama as well. Hasn't put in a representative time yet, but I'm sure that McLaren will be going quickly. Oh dear, I told you, the 130R is not an easy corner for this Mercedes. And another one of the Unicorns of Love cars gets it all wrong. I'm going to have to stop pointing the cameras on these guys, because unfortunately, I don't seem to be doing them any good at all. Heading towards the start-finish line. We'll see what it would have been from Gronewold. 4 minutes left on the clock, so not too many opportunities left. It's a long lap around here, and it would have been a 58.2. But still, wouldn't have been good enough for pole. Would have actually not even got himself inside the top 10 with that lap time. So still time to find, but not many laps to go about finding it. As your running order right now, still Whitehead, followed by Boothby and Korekka. So Veloce 1, 2, and 3 as it stands at the moment, with just 3.5 minutes of qualifying left to go. Statsenko bailing out of a lap, getting himself set up. Should have time for a couple more if he's got the fuel and tyres to do it. As the ITB racing driver, who's been in the series now for just a couple of weeks or so, looking to try to see if he can move his way up the order and further inside that top 10. Lobmeyer on another lap. He didn't improve last time around, made a mistake in actual fact. 58.687. Currently, he's got 5 thousandths to Michael Frey and one of the fellow Porsches ahead of him. And then we've got Max Frank and Tariq Adam inside the top 20 on exactly the same time to the thousand. Who's that pulling over? That is Grantas Korekkas. So he will only have one more opportunity for a lap. And he needs to get himself out of the pit lane relatively quickly, because his outlap will be just over 2 minutes or so. And there's only 2.5 minutes left on the clock. Valentin Barrier in the Ferrari, still trying to make his way further inside of the... will break his way in towards the top 10. Currently a 10th of a second up on his previous lap time. Further down the order, De Campo, Fideli, trying to see if they can move their way inside the top 20. And Bastian Richter out on another lap once more. I think Korekkas has just started making his way out of the pit lane, so this will be the final flurry of laps coming in from drivers. See what the 296 can do. Be very good in that opening sector, I would imagine. Gronewold gets himself a representative time and just a few hundredths ahead of his teammate P4 for the number 22 car. And I think it's going to be marginal as to whether or not he'll get 2 extra laps out of this. I think he'll only get the 1, so not too many opportunities left. And that's for a fact, that will be it for Gronewold, so no higher than P4 for the Unicorns of Love driver. Valentin Barrier trying to see if he can make his way inside of the top 10. I think he's lost the time on his Delta. What's it going to be for the Frenchman as he crosses the line? and it's a 58.480, so no improvement for him. Luke Whitehead halfway through a lap at the moment. He's got the ITB racing car of, who is that? I think that is Jacob Osterman. It is indeed. And also the likes of Lewis Roters and Mikhail Statsenko trying to get himself back in towards top 10. Can't get out the way of Luke Whitehead then. Whereabouts is Statsenko? Statsenko just starting the lap at the moment. Iemelo coming towards the line. We've got the likes of Michael Frey and Lodmeyer. Two Porsches improving in the closing stages of qualifying. Let's see what the Italian driver can do. Jan Drexler will start no higher than 18th. Vanti Barry, I think, has parked it as well, so he will only start a maximum of P12, but a few flurry of improvements coming in, and still opportunities for some cars to squeeze in one more lap before the end of the session. Iemelo, what can he do in the Lamborghini? Letting the V10 roar its way towards the line, and he gets himself up provisionally into P12. Let's see if there's any more improvements to come from him. Luke Whitehead now coming in towards the Casio Triangle, taking a chunk of curb and a half, sliding his way through there. I'm not sure it will be, but it might be. Actually, I wasn't sure that the exit was going to be good enough, but to lay down the gauntlet even further, Luke Whitehead will have another opportunity to put in a lap after this, but it's a 57.585 from the number 3 car and your championship leader, and he is going for another one, and even that lap did not look like that was the maximum potential that he could extract out of that car. As more and more cars closing out their session, Nils Nark's only as high as P5 for the time being. You've got Jardier down in P15, and could tell from his tweet and stream name he wasn't feeling the most confident about the session. Lodmeyer climbs up to P17 in the closing stages, but what can Bastian Richter do? We know that he's got time available in this car. It was looking like a very solid 57 earlier on. Luke Whitehead won't improve any further on the 585. He has brought his session to an end. Bastian Richter, I don't think, is going to challenge. The Porsche driver is a little bit clumsy on the exit final corner. So is the McLaren driver. I think that was George Boothby pulling over to the side of the road. Bastian Richter, can he still improve? I don't think he will. In fact, and he won't indeed. But Jacob Osterman could actually put something towards the front row of the grid in the closing stages. 2/10s up still on his time, and still opportunities for the ITB racing driver to move his way up through the order. Whitehead, Boothby, Korekas, Cornwell, Richter, Narks and Uknavicius all have closed out their session. Ahead of him, Tariq Adam moves his way into 21st in the closing stages, with Matty DeCampo. Those two have been scrapping out in the qualifying session. Santama briefly goes purple. I think he's made a big mistake, so he looks to start potentially in 33rd place. But Jacob Osterman in the ITB racing car. I think he's also got Marco Bischoff, or no, excuse me, I think actually that is for Sprout Esports lurking behind in the Lamborghini. Coming in towards the Casio Triangle, it'd have to be a mighty sequence of corners if he wants to challenge for pole position. It's not going to be good enough for pole. Everyone struggling with the exit of the final turn there, and Osterman barely going to improve as he heads towards the line, tries to have the shortest line that he can. He will break into the 57s, I believe, and he gets himself up to P3, and Noah Reid, as he looks to cross the line, the last car across the line, and he gets himself up into 22nd place at the end of that session. But Luke Whitehead, Confident, was calling it in the chat that Whitehead's pace in the Porsche for qualifying was looking quick and mighty, and that is exactly what the British driver and the championship leader has delivered today. A 0.585, exceptional pace from Luke Whitehead. But now the race is a different story. 60 minutes. Tyre wear will be playing into effect, but if Luke Whitehead does want to bring home a victory and another victory onto that ever-growing tally, he very much needs to be looking to get away at the start of this race. If those McLarens that are around him manage to get him in towards turn 1 or on the opening lap, it may be a little bit trickier for the Porsche driver, so I have to wait and see what he is able to bring home in all of that. But I think one way or another it is going to be a fantastic race, because that qualifying session going down to the wire, as it so often does. And we'll make our way through the grid in just a moment. A 6th pole position for Luke Whitehead. An incredible season that he is having, but he's got to make sure he stays consistent. George Boothby, remember, if you're looking at those championship standings, there are going to be 2 drop scores at the end of the season, and effectively Boothby has had a DNS, so he had a no-show at round number 2 of the season, which is currently influencing his overall points total. And if you make that adjustment between the drivers, there's only a couple of 100 points that sits between them. But Luke Whitehead then starts on pole, making a Veloce 1-2 with George Boothby as championship rival, starting in P2. And there's Jacob Osterman P3. Garantis Korekis, last week's winner, starts in P4, with Tobias Gronewald on his return into the series, starting P5. Imagine that he would have felt like he would have wanted a bit more out of that car, as would have his teammate Bastian Richter, the 2 Mercedes in 5th and 6th. Looks mighty at times, but tricky to extract pace out of. Niels Narks in the Aston Martin, legend of the community, starting in P7, with Tanas Juknavicius, the recent Veloce Academy recruit, starts in P8, and fantastic for that number 40 plate in the server. Tinko van der Velde, our reigning champion, starts in P9, with Lewis Roters rounding out the top 10 for ITB Racing. He'll be followed up by his teammate Mikhail Statsenko in the number 31 car, and he will start in P11. And Dario Iamolo starting in the number 14 in P12. I did have a little bit of a look at the maths for the championship, but at least from what I could tell, I don't believe that Luke Whitehead can mathematically close out the championship today. I don't believe so. With the number of races that we have left, I think that the adjusted points gap between himself and Boothby is close enough for it still to be going at least to the next round. I think he could very much be in contention to close it out in round 11, but I think for today that the championship's still very much all on the cards. We'll have to see how that plays out in the grand scheme of things. Frey, Barrier, Bischoff, Schade, Jardier, Walsingham make your way to P18 on the grid, with Lobmeyer starting in P19 for the number 13 Porsche, followed up by Mattia De Campo in the number 9 Ferrari 296, closing out that top 20 and seeing what he can do. Tariq Adam bringing himself back into series, and another one of the Genesis Esports crew, as the South African community really feels like it's been booming this season on the world of ACC. So fantastic to see more of them in the top split of the Pro Series, as Noah Reeder and Jan Drexler make up the next 2 positions on the grid, with Cody Sherritt, the next of the Genesis Esports car, but in the Ferrari 296 for the number 24 in P24. With then the likes of Antonio Fedeli starting in 25th position in the number 28 car. Max Frank starts 26th in the number 27. And then Dennis Wietschorker starting a little bit further down the order than he likely would have wanted in that number 26 car. And he's been having such a strong series of races recently, as Moritz Lerner returning to the series. Of course, making some adjustments from one platform to another, but starts in 28th place. But watch that man, a lot of experience inside the cockpit of that car. I'm sure that he'll be looking to move his way forward in the race. Closing out the top 30 is Vincent Proel and Jacob Schaber, followed up by Oystein Brennan, the Norwegian driver, with Zach Duran, the first of the Americans, starting in 32nd place. And he'll be followed up by Arba Santama in the number 23 car, starting in P33. He'll start ahead of Luke Addison, a man that had a mighty finish at Donington Park to climb his way in the end to P2 in that race, as we go from one Genesis 296 to the other in the hands of Giovanni Pozio in the number 39 car. Then we have Claudius Lutzek in the number 36, starting in P36. Oliver Ferres in the number 25 starts in 37th place, with then the next of our drivers, Mattia Mex, in that green Lamborghini. We saw him have a little bit of a moment in that qualifying session at the second Degner. Let's see what he can do in the race. Samuel Ratz in the number 37 car starts in 39th position. And then closing out the grid, Jonathan Clifford, the next of the Americans, in that, of course, Lamborghini that he has been wielding for some time, and seen it go from one generation to the next, but he has stuck with that platform, is continuing to find time in that car. So the race very shortly looking to begin. We'll have 60 minutes of action here at Suzuka, and Kylo has put together a little bit of mathematics for us, and apparently if Luke Whitehead were to win this race and Boothby finishes P6, then Luke Whitehead would close out the championship this evening, as looking to potentially have enough points total, so that regardless of what happens in the next couple of rounds. So I do trust you, Kylo, as you've done a lot of historical analysis and calculations over the last few weeks. So we will use that as the benchmark. We'll have to monitor how Boothby gets on. I'm sure he will be very much aware of the championship situation with his teammates. Currently, of course, sitting in P2, still very much keeping himself in contention going into the closing stages, but he'll be looking to try to get that McLaren ahead of his teammates, and seeing if he can put Luke Whitehead under some additional pressure in the final couple of races. Remember, anything can happen in the Case King Pro Series. Anything can happen in motorsport, full stop, as everybody starts to get themselves ready. My goodness, Neil's come flying on through, making sure that his brakes are up to temperature. He'll now have to briefly park it as he lets everyone go by. Luke Whitehead says a little bit of a friendly hello as we get ourselves ready to go racing. Round number 10 of the Case King Pro Series. We've had 9 action-packed, fantastic races so far this season, and championship leader Luke Whitehead mathematically may have the opportunity to close it out with 2 rounds to go, but he's got his teammate and championship rival George Boothby on the front row alongside him, who will be trying to do everything that he can to stop that from happening and see if we can have a contest going down to the wire as we approach the end of the year. 60 minutes of Suzuka is about to get underway, so everybody, it's going to be a good one. Buckle in, get ready for some racing action. They approach the start-finish line ready to go. You see everyone trying to jostle for position before you've even got towards the first turn and underway, and it looks like it was a good start from Luke Whitehead, using all of that torque and acceleration of the flat 6 power Porsche. Everybody trying to find a way in towards turn 1, but Luke Whitehead still then leads. Boothby P2, Karekas and Osterman side by side on the podium positions, but Osterman's going to fend him off, and they make their way through the opening series of corners. No calamities, but it looks like just as they funnel their way in towards the S's. The Porsche of Luke Whitehead already breaking away at the front of the field, using all of that cornering capability amongst that car as they try to see how they get on further down the order. You can see side by side action. Niels now trying to go up the inside of one of the Mercedes. They couldn't make it stick. It's walking. Oh, someone into the gravel. I think that was Jardier. Jardier in towards the gravel on the exit, on the entry to Dunlop Curve, and side by side between Marco Bischoff and Adel Walsing and Vlotchen car trying to go down the inside in towards the first deck. They're almost contact. Hardcore Racing, who were only half a lap in around the outside. The 2-time champ on the Pro Series gets it away into P16, but they'll be under pressure immediately, I'm sure, in towards next break. No contact! Contact! Someone's around! And it was, I think, was that Statsenko? One of the McLarens is around. Who is that that's gone tumbling down the order? It was Lewis Rotas, Valentin Barry as well, as they all jostle position through 200R. Lobmeyer trying to follow through as well. Michael Frey, the Swiss, trying to gain positions in the process. Disaster for one of the potential championship protectors. And Michael Frey in towards the wall on the entry towards Spoon Curve. Into the gravel he goes. And now complete chaos. I said Suzuka could be dramatic. I didn't think it was going to be this dramatic so early on. Morris Lerner on the inside on the exit of Spoon Curve. Side by side with Noah Reed and Mercedes versus Lamborghini Power. And in towards 130R they go. How are the Mercedes fare in towards this corner? We know it could be a tricky one. We've also got side by side almost between Lamborghini and McLaren further up the order. But they get through there just about okay, side by side in front of these two. Will go on board with Morris Lerner. You can see so densely packed, you can't get ahead. With between them, there's contact again. That's Lobmeyer almost around Morris Lerner, trying to find an opportunity on the right hand side. He's cut across the grass. Noah Reed has gone around entirely. Further down the order, disaster for Noah Reed. Oh, that's a scary rejoin. And there's going to be even scarier of 2 Ferrari 296s going around the final turn with 3 wide. We've already done 1 lap. Heading towards turn 1 they go. Luke Whitehead is all much calmer at the front of the field. Down top 3 sitting as is, but in towards turn 1 it's chaos. Jan Drexler up the inside, Max Frank, Jacob Shaber battling away, and Vincent Proel getting involved in all this as well in the 296 just behind, and heading in towards that series of S's once more. But who's going to come out on top of this? It looks like Shaber will maintain position for the time being. didn't catch exactly what took place in the opening lap there for some of those drivers heading in towards the gravel, but Walsingham swapping position. Rota's yellow flag for him, and he's off into the gravel again. Lewis Rota's disaster on the opening couple of laps for the ITV Racing driver. Caused 57 minutes on the clock, opportunities to make his way back through the field. We know how good his race pace can be, but not the opening laps that he would have wanted. We'll try to see if we can catch a replay of what happened to the number 15 car. He was side by side, I believe, with Marco Bischoff. Up through Dunlop Curve they go. Their natural fact, is he just going to make a mistake all by himself? Catches the grass. I said it was deadly. Bounces his way in towards the gravel. Tries to get under control, and that's the problem. As soon as it lets go underneath you, just cannot find the grip. You don't have the time to steer the car out of that section because it just kangaroos its way in towards the gravel. And that is P17 now for the German driver. So disappointment for him. Meanwhile, battling for P12. That is Valentin Barrett versus Marco Schade side by side towards 130. Oh, who's going to come out top of this one? It's the Ferrari. But Marco Bischoff might be about to use the opportunity around the outside. The two-time champ down the inside in towards Casio Triangle, trying to see if he can get the job done, and he does. Opportunistic stuff from Marco Bischoff in the Sprout Esports Lamborghini. The Honda compromised on the entry there from bravery of Valentin Honda around the outside. And Marco Bischoff, the number one man in the server, number one man on the LFM platform, getting the job done in that V10 powered Lamborghini. As it's all kicking off further down the order, I can see several cars going side by side, everyone trying to file for position, and it's going to be Michael Frey versus Lurchik, and there's contact on the entry towards turn one, and the Porsche and the BMW straight into the gravel. The man should just about get going again, hopefully rejoin safely. I think they will just about. A little bit of rallycross from the number 21 car, and they all get going once again. Carnage is indeed the word. 5 minutes of this race, and it's already had several cars in the gravel, up, down, left, right and centre, and see how they play out through the next series of S's. Cars trying to recover through. You can see Jardier amongst that pack already. Velux and Noah Reed as well, trying to see if he can filter his way back through. Max Frank side by side with Jan Drexler in towards the first deck. Then maybe trying to see if he can do anything into the second one, but he can't. I'll have to wait for another opportunity. Meanwhile, Luke Whitehead, 1.3 seconds clear of the rest of the field. That Porsche looking mighty so far, and that's exactly what he needed and wanted to do in the opening phase of this race. And George Boothby's got a bit of pressure from Jacob Osterman, currently sitting in P3 for the ITB Racing team. We'll have to see what he can do. Max Frank, I think, maybe looking for another opportunity to Jan Drexler. Will he try and make an overtake in towards Spoon? He can't. The BMW has just a bit too much straight line speed up the hill to make that an opportunity for the Porsche driver, the TC0 meta that we currently live in, being very twitchy and tricky on the exit. And yet Mr. Carper is absolutely right. It's going to be tricky for the stewards to judge all of these. Lewis Rotors almost pushing Lobmeyer along in towards 130. Alba can't do anything there. Does he think about a dive up the inside? He does not. He's going to wait for another opportunity to come about. Jump over the curb for Morris Lerner just behind that, compromise his exit and run. Just a little bit white flag for a couple of cars, and I believe some side-by-side action. Jonathan Clifford versus Oystein Brando getting squeezed on the exit, and it might be Oliver Ferris and says thank you very much, lads, and may even take the pair of them. Let's see, we'll go on board. There is almost a mistake there from Ferris. I've judged that one too soon. Ferris off onto the grass, and now he goes from being the one on the attack to now under pressure from Michael Frey. Tarek Adam almost 3 wide, heading in towards turn one. Porsche around the outside, can he get the move done? It looks like he might have done, and Oliver Ferris, that mistake proving costly as he then loses a position in the process. And Michael Frey, the Swiss driver, trying to recover his way up the order, and will look to get himself back dialed in once again. Look at that fantastic shot at all these cars making their way through the S's on the opening lap. Yellow flag for Vincent Proel. Have we had more carnage? We indeed have. Luke Anderson as well. White flag for him. Not sure if there's anything that's happened to the Genesis Esports car, but that is Vincent Proel trying to recover his way. What about Luke Anderson? What's happening with him? I think he's dropped a couple of positions, but I'm not quite sure how that ended up coming to be. We'll try to see if we can catch what happened on the replay. So Vincent Proel, through the S's they go. Was that contact with Luke Anderson? It's one of the Genesis 296s anyway, and he does. I think that was exactly what happened there. So lost momentum for the South African driver, and Vincent Proel in that number 32 car spinning around and dropping to the back of the field. And disappointment there for the 296. The only thing that is rather beneficial for him, of course, is there's going to be a few drivers with some penalties, I imagine, in this race, as the stewards are going to have a mightily busy time, and there is still plenty of time on the clock for things to chop and change. Meanwhile, someone's looking very close for an overtake. It's Max Frank once more in that Porsche, but he just can't quite get on the back of the BMW Drexler just ahead of him. And in towards the Casio Triangle once again they will go. Not the greatest of lines or exits for the Porsche driver, so an opportunity will have to come around a bit later on. Meanwhile, Grant Korekas applying the pressure to Osterman, who's still very much lurking behind George Busby, but a 58.190 from Luke Whitehead at the front of the field. That Porsche already extending that lead to over 2 seconds in just 8.5 minutes worth of racing. And I'll tell you what, this is the opening at 8.5 minutes. The next 51 are going to be... I don't even think, to be honest. I'm not sure stewards want to either. Let's see how this one continues to play out, but the Veloce McLaren sandwiching the ITB racing car at the moment. Of course, last week's race winner, Grant Korekas, will be looking to see if he can get himself up onto the podium, continue that podium streak from last time out as they fly their way in towards the hairpin. Potential opportunities for some overtakes around here if you can get near enough on the entry. Send it up the inside, Kamui Kobayashi style. But as of yet, nothing presenting itself to this leading group of drivers. Giardi, I think, has just made a move over Luce. We'll try to see if we can gather what happened between those two. Some side-by-side action, perhaps, through the S's. And you can see he was behind the BMW. Does he launch an attack in towards Dunlop Curve? He might do, because you can do a bit of a surprise. Here is the door left open. Not really, although it's a wide moment for Luce. Dips a little bit of a wheel in towards the grass, has to back out, and in the end, the McLaren driver gets himself up the inside, and Luce backs out of the fight. Doesn't want to have any more drama in his race, and that allows Jadier to move up into 32nd place. Meanwhile, Michael Frey and Jonathan Clifford having a very intense battle. In actual fact, will go on board the rear diffuser of the number 21 car, because that's Ferris versus Clifford. Side by side in towards 130. Up they go. They've got Tariq Adam in towards players. Well, big brave move from Ferris around the outside. And how does he fare in the next series of corners? Excuse me, Clifford, because he's under pressure from Jardier, Adam, Lutzek. As a side by side, Jardier around the outside turns into the inside in towards the last apex, and that is into the gravel for Clifford. Disaster for the American. Jardier gets his way through. Lutzek versus Tariq Adam, and we're going to have almost 4 wide heading in towards this next section. We'll go on board with Jardier because I think he's going to have a great view of the action as we head towards turn 1. Lutzek, I think, has got the move down. The BMW uses its straight line speed, goes around a couple of cars. Genesis Esports of Clifford versus Adam there. Clifford comes out on top. Samuel Ratz now trying to go around the outside of the South African in the 296. Turns to the inside for the next series of the S's. It goes back and forth. Either way, can he get across the nose? He can't. And now 296 towards the outside, and he does lose momentum. What about Fideli trying to go around the outside? He can't do it. In actual fact, be careful for Noah Reeder on the inside for a moment there, but in the end, they will hold position, give or take. And look at that. Those final group of cars from the 34th place to the back of the field, separated by barely a second. As out to Campo tries to someone on the inside of Vietschorker in towards the first Degner, but unable to make the move stick. Cars amongst our top 3 continuing to spread out. Luke Whitehead, another half a second clear of the rest of the field. 58.2 versus a 58.7 to his teammate last time round. Jacob Osterman applying the pressure to George Boothby for that P2 spot. Korekas now falling a little bit away from these two, and Bastian Richter closing the gap in that Mercedes, trying to get that car in towards the top 4. Max Frank applying the pressure around the outside. He looks to go on Jan Drexler. Can he get the move done? Drexler is going to back out that one. And the Porsche sees his way up into the top 20. He's been trying to make that move for quite a while. Lewis Roters, I think, may have had a bit of an opportunity in the scrap with Moritz Lerner there, a bit wide on the exit of the Casio Triangle. Manages to get it all together just about as they head to the start-finish straight one more time. Tinger van der Velde versus Niels Narks, 2 titans of the ACC community, and they've had some intense scraps out the Nürburgring last season, and of course on plenty of other occasions as well. The BMW driver trying to see what he can size up over the Aston Martin. The BMW should have a little bit of a straight line speed advantage. May burn through its tyres a little bit more, and also maybe a little bit more squirrely in some of the slow speed stuff. You can see the Aston in that opening sector, able just to open up the gap to about another car length or so over the young Dutchman, and seeing what he can get out of that one. Looking further down the order, Noah Reeder trying to recover his way through a field, down 15 places. Let's actually have a little bit of a look and see. In this opening phase of the race, got Mathieu Mex has gained 12 positions since starting. Moritz Lerner, he's gained 10. That is the use of experience, wealth of experience that number 19 car possesses in his hands. And in actual fact, speaking of which, other things are kicking off around him. Lobmeier's gone around at the hairpin, and several cars being benefactors there. Lewis Rotors amongst all that chaos as well. And what has happened here, as we'll try to catch up with the action. I've got this horrible feeling, have I made a bit of a commentator's curse? I don't think Moritz Lerner's involved in this. It might be Lewis Rotors, though, in that McLaren just behind. He would have come from a long way back if there has been contact, or has Lobmeier just got it wrong on his own. They get into the... Well, I must admit, that's not quite the sequence I thought was going to be playing out there. I don't think... I'm honestly, to be honest, not really sure what happened there. I'm so sorry, Lobmeier. I don't mean to laugh at that moment, but it just... that was a really peculiar one. On the Bryce time, Brenham sending it up the inside. Out the chicane, going a little bit too deep. Matthew Max fending him off and goes back around the outside for the switcheroo and goes back into 26th. I can't tell if it's a TC off moment or what, really. It looked a little bit too early in the corner to be that, but I'm sure there's not many more options. Meanwhile, yellow flag again for Vincent Proel, not having the best times in the 296. And we'll see what happened here to the Ferrari. Heading in towards 130R, battling amongst a couple of other cars. Has he just lost it through his corner? It can be a tricky one as the car changes throughout the race. Oh my goodness, that's not what you want to be doing. He's backed out of the throttle mid-corner, almost does the 360, and he does do the 720 though on the exit. Very nicely done from Vincent. No, it wasn't really what he was intending by the end of that, but contact with Veetschoker in that pursuing McLaren. That's a tricky one because you don't really want to be backing out of the throttle on the exit curb there because it can start to destabilize the car a little bit. So an awkward one, but you would potentially, I think, have to apportion a bit more blame to the following car. That, fundamentally, the 296 is done whatever, has happened in the corner. The car behind has the responsibility to make sure that they negotiate any overtaking opportunities and things like that safely. So we'll see what the stewards say amongst that and all the other chaos that's happened in the opening 15 minutes of this race. But could be a penalty heading the way of Dennis Veetschoker. So not a good day so far for Vincent Proel. Meanwhile, Ugnavicius closing the gap to Tinko van der Velde. Tinko losing the ground to Niels Narks over the last couple of laps. I'll tell you what, also we've got Groneveld and Bastian Richter. Have they swapped positions in the last couple of laps? I could have sworn that Groneveld was leading that Mercedes duo. I can't quite remember now, though, but Bastian Richter, one way or another, is applying the pressure to Grantas Korekas, who hasn't been able to stick with that leading couple of McLarens. Of course, Luke Wyatt has just checked out the front of his field, 3.7 seconds clear of the rest of the grid. But with George Boothby Osterman battling for P2, Korekas was looking like he may be in contention to scrap away in that as well, but the two Mercedes from the Unicorns of Love team applying a lot of pressure. Meanwhile, right now we've got Lewis Rotors versus Max Frank in the opening sequence of corners. It looks like the Ferrari has come out on top of that one, gone board with the McLaren driver. We know how good the pace of this number 15 car can be as he tries to find an opportunity somewhere where he can explore the performance of his car. Twitchy on the exit there, and that may in actual fact open up an opportunity for Max Frank, who's trying to get a nose up towards the outside of the first deck there, but can't make that one happen. And that opens up the gap though, just a couple of car lengths, and Drexler will also be watching this with a great deal of interest because Max Frank, will he look to send one up the inside? We know how late on the brakes the Porsche can be. He's kind of showing the nose, but he can't commit to it fully. And will have to be mindful, make sure there's no contact mid-corner. As they head up towards the hill once more. How much space has this car got in straight line? Looks pretty good from the number 27, trying to go on the inside. Lewis Rotors will look to cover that, and Max Frank has no option but to back out of the throttle there. Meanwhile, side by side, oh, that's Aidan Walsingham and Marco Schade going side by side, but the wide moment for Lewis Rotors does open up the opportunity for Max Frank. Rotors' day going from bad to worse, but I don't think it's quite over and done with, because that McLaren is pretty pacey in a straight line, heading towards 130. Out they go. Jan Drexler could be getting involved in all this as well. Rotors trying to attack, trying to defend. He's trying to do everything all at once, but they will keep position for the time being. Does he send one up the inside? You hear the hesitation on the throttle from Max Frank. Got to be careful of the track limits of that section of the circuit. Not confident on the entry in towards the Casio Triangle. Pretty square and tidy exits from the McLaren. But the straight line speed and acceleration of this Porsche looking pretty handy for the number 27 at the moment. It's had a busy day so far, but it does look like Frank is going to hold on to the position for the time being. In actual fact, it may be Drexler that's looking a bit more racy and competitive to snatch away that 19th place from the number 15 McLaren. So we'll keep an eye and see how this battle progresses. Meanwhile, Merida trying to go around the outside of Tariq, and very close between the pair of them. We'll try to go on board with Vitshoka, watching these two scrap away in towards turn 1. They go, the McLaren driver going to go deep on the inside. Merida trying to get to the inside for turn 2, but has a little bit of a snap on the entry. Can't do it. And then I would imagine single file through the next section of corners. Difficult to open up an opportunity here. The main place that you tend to see something here is a little bit like we had at Silverstone last week, through Village Corner in towards the loop, where you saw drivers kind of carrying a bit of overspeed, which doesn't suit the line through the loop whatsoever. What it does do is it manages to sometimes launch a bit of a surprise attack on your opponent and get yourself track position by being on that inside line. And you can do that through that final right-hander of the S's and then in towards Dunlop Curve, but none of these drivers are able to make use of that on this occasion. And Vitshaw has got to be careful here, because Samuel Ratz in that 296 launching an attack down the inside. He does, he launches from downtown. There's a little bit of contact with Noah Reeder. Manages to just brush the rear diffuser of that Lamborghini and keeps it just about A-OK between the three of them. But that could have been a big crash. He's got the company of Vitshoka all the way out the hill, but using that 296's cornering and stopping capabilities from number 37 to get himself into P37. We'll have to see when the stewards have anything to say about that. Meanwhile, the two unicorns love Mercedes pushing each other along down the start-finish straight. And now the pit window opens 20 minutes into this race. It's been chaos up and down the order, and the inside of the top 10 is just as busy. And you can see the likes of Lewis Rotors, Paul Lobmeyer into the pits as well. So going for a big undercut here, and I would imagine also repairing any damage accumulated in the opening phase of this race. Michael Frey into the pits as well. But looking in at our top three, the pace advantage for Luke Whitehead may be starting to fall away just a little bit. 58.8 in this on that last lap. And George Boothby, Osterman, there or thereabouts with the pace there as well. We'll see what happens as the stint progresses. No reader, there was some form of contact that saw him drop down the order. Unfortunately, amongst all the other drama and chaos that we had on the opening lap, couldn't quite catch how that came to be. But in terms of the race that's played out so far, Luke Whitehead, the perfect getaway from him from pole position. 4.5 seconds is his lead. Championship rival George Boothby still doing enough to keep himself in the fight to at least round 11. But he'll be a little bit disgruntled to see that number 3 car ahead of him just extending that lead both on track and in the championship. Make it more difficult for George Boothby to see if he can get a championship title to his name. Of course, the winningest driver on the LFM platform, but just hasn't quite been able to bring it all together. Bastian Richter, I was about to say, was looking to apply the pressure on to Granska Records, but that Mercedes understeering his way through 130 has got to be careful. His teammate Tavares Grunewald had a bit of a moment there as well, and it's a big undercut then for the Unicorns Love Car. Now, this is very interesting. The Mercedes tends to not be the kindest on its tyres, particularly on those fronts. And so I'm surprised to see that car come in so early. Meanwhile, Santama versus Luke Addison in towards Casio Triangle. 296 sent towards the outside, but unable to make anything stick And Luke Harrison actually, in fact, going to come in to the pits to get a fresh set of tyres on, trying to undercut those cars ahead. So we could see Bastian Richter move his way up through the order and see what he is able to achieve, but we'll have to potentially go into a little bit of defensive mode in the closing stages of the race and really have to try to use all of that V8 goodness to keep anyone behind. But of course, was very close to those cars ahead, so we could see him even jump up towards those podium positions depending on what the response time is from the likes of Boothby, Osterman, Karekas. We've seen strategies from the likes of Tinko and Whitehead in the past go for those overcuts. And you see, Whitehead, he's in a pretty strong place at the moment. He's got 4.5 seconds to George Boothby. He can look to go, I would imagine, at the halfway point. He'll play it safe. George Boothby hasn't gone for an aggressive undercut. He doesn't have to worry about that side of it. So he should have enough margin where he can really kind of pick and choose his strategy. But these other drivers, between second and what was about 6th, 7th place, that's going to be where those difference makers are going to be. Osterman, in actual fact, has dropped away from George Boothby over the last couple of laps. Boothby, in actual fact, along with Karekas, the fastest cars on track. Very close lap times between Karekas, Boothby and Whitehead at the front of the pack as they continue to make their way through onto another lap. And do not rule out anything for a moment in this race, because track limits can play into this, strategy can play into this, and dare I say, just a disaster of a lap could play into it as well. Osterman, I think, maybe responding, and he does go into the pit. So he wanted to cover off, I think, Bastian Richter, and he is losing a bit of ground over the last couple of laps, and maybe not too convinced about how his 720S Evo is placing him for this second phase of the race. So we'll see whereabouts he comes out. Eddie Walsingham putting some pressure onto the Honda of Marco Schada. But I don't think he's going to be able to do anything against that Honda. Straight line speed of that car has always been pretty mighty. And our observers and wonderful, wonderful helpers in the chat have noted the fact that Bastian Richter in clean air at the moment. Got to be careful about that, though, for the track limits on the exit spoon curve. You can see him pushing along at the moment. In actual fact, let's go on board with him. See how he deals with 130R. Still pretty heavy fuel on board. And trying to keep it within those track limits. Seems relatively planted through there, though. And of course, Osterman will be making his way out of the pits, and we'll start to get an initial impression as to how well that undercut has worked. Whereabouts is Osterman? He's just starting to get out of the way of the pit lane. I think comfortably is going to be sitting ahead of Bastian Richter. He does indeed. So no concerns there for Jacob Osterman. I have to say then, in terms of contention for the podium positions, that Richter very much not likely to be challenging for those on strategy, certainly. So could either have been a slow pit stop, repairing some damage perhaps, or something hasn't played into a very well for him. The two Porsches very close together. Will we see either of them coming into the pits? We don't. Abe Santama comes out of the pits, and Michael Frey versus Lonmire. Will we see a move between them? We've got kind of a bit of a John Player special livery on that number 21 car. That's not what he's worried about at the moment. He's worried about the man behind him, Lonmire, trying to go around the outside in towards turn 1. And, apparently we have a pit lane speeding penalty, which will be a stop-go 30. And I believe that may be for Bastian Richter, if I've understood that correctly. So disaster for him. Michael Frey fends off the fellow Porsche. Meanwhile, Wietschorker versus Clifford. Wietschorker sent all the way around the outside, and Clifford sent it towards the apex and sent around somewhat. We'll try to see if we can catch on the replay exactly what happened there. We couldn't quite see from that camera angle. You see, it all started from the hairpin, so they were side by side through there, climbing up towards the top of the hill. Of course, that slightly shorter line for the McLaren driver. A lot of space left through 200R up in towards this next left hand. You see is the gap that's going to be closed. Oh, it's the smallest of contacts between the pair of them. And unfortunately, aggressive side-by-side action in the end comes to a rather brutal end. And Clifford, whilst he does get going once more, of course, has lost a chunk of time in the process. Not too many fights taking place on circle. The yellow flag for no reader. That is him just emerging out of the pits at the moment. We'll keep an eye on Walsingham versus Marco Schada, and we'll try to have a little bit of a gander at our stewards' inquiries and see how they've been getting on. So, as we scroll through We've got two lots of 15-second time penalties for the number 13 and number 33 cars for causing incidents on the opening lap. So who do they belong to? They belong to the likes of, that is Tariq Adam, and also Paul Lobmeyer, who has received those penalties. So disappointing stuff, unfortunately, for them, and some big consequences on their races. Of course, number 31 car has a 10-second time penalty. That is Mikhail Statsenko, currently sitting in P7. Of course, hasn't done his pit stop yet, but unfortunate stuff there for the ITB Racing member. 5-second penalty for the number 28. Let's see if we can find them in the server. That is Antonio Fideli a bit further down the order. So disappointment for him. Meanwhile, George Boothby has come into the pits now. So has Juk Novicius, with Whitehead, Gronewald, Narks, Tingo Van der Velde, Statsenko and Iamalo all staying out towards the front. Meanwhile, Max Frank scrapping away with Cody Sherratt at the moment. And Matt Frank looking pretty racy as it stands. We'll see what he'll do. That's not the car I want. No, come back. Oh, my leaderboard's running away from me. There he goes. Pulled out the slipstream entirely around the outside. In towards turn one he goes, but it looks like the 296 is going to hold on to that position for the time being. And whilst he plays cat and mouse with the far ahead of him, I've been playing cat and mouse on the leaderboard for trying to track that number 27 car down. We'll stick with him for a little bit and see what he can size up in that Porsche through the S's and in towards Dunlop Curve. They will end up going. 10-second time penalty for the number 36 car. Who does that belong to in a grid? That is Lucek in the BMW further down the grid. Warning for the number 17. That was Noah Eder for avoidable contact on lap 3. Number 16 car has a 15-second time penalty. That is for Luke Addison in the Genesis Esports, as George Boothby and some of those other cars start to emerge out of the pit lane, and Jacob Osterman around the outside. And that is not what George Boothby would have wanted. They're still side by side on the exit. Turn 2, a little bit of contact, and George Boothby almost sent into the grass. And what will be said between those two, but the undercut strategy from Jacob Osterman gets himself ahead of George Boothby and makes that championship situation just a little bit trickier for him. Meanwhile, he needs to check in on Max Frank versus Cody Sherratt. Porsche trying to go around the outside. Can't make that one stick. Can he do the over and under in towards the second phase? Oh, big slide on the entry. Trying to get the power down. He does get the power down, but Cody Sherratt, can he do anything on the exit in the 296? But I think Max Frank has got the move done, continuing to make his way up through the order. But in terms of the championship, whilst it won't be a deciding factor today, it could be vital points for George Boothby against his championship rival Luke Whitehead in terms of how that plays out in the end. So that undercut strategy paying dividends for the ITB Racing car, and now he just needs to try to get his head down and see what he can do. We'll have to see if the stewards have anything to say about that contact in towards turn 3, as it looked kind of unfortunate. I don't think there was anything too severe or aggressive, but the kind of magnitude of contact really did seem to upset the balance of George Boothby's car. So we'll have to see how the stewards view that one. More cars coming into the pit lane. We've got the likes of Dingo Van der Velde, Marco Schada, Barrier, Bischoff all in the pits. Whitehead, Narks, Statsenko, Iamalo, Lerner in the pits have stayed out. Tobias Gronewald has come into the pits, as Dario Iamalo trying to hunt down the McLaren ahead of him, who has got a penalty, so he should inherit that position after the stops. And we'll have to see. Keep an eye on Jacob Osterman, of course, now your net P2 runner. George Boothby's got the company of his teammate, Grant Carekas, a little bit on his case. Where is Luke Whitehead? Of course, he is in a pretty comfy spot as it stands out front at the moment. Gronewald, though, coming out of the pits, emerging just ahead of his teammate, and gets himself back into the position he was of that train before. So I believe he is currently sitting in net P5 of that train. But Marco Bischoff versus Schada just behind the Honda driver, and Aidan Walsingham slots his way ahead of the Honda. So the undercut strategy working out for him. Max Frank scything his way down into towards turn 1 and 2, seeing quite a few yellow flags. More and more cars start to emerge their way out of the pit lane. Always time Brenham the next to do so, and he emerges in 25th place. And we'll see how that all continues to play out. Keep an eye on this fight as well, actually, as Luke Whitehead now does come into the pits. And we'll see as Niox comes in as well. What about the likes of Statsenko and Iamalo? And they will both make their way in towards the pit lane. So a lot of front runners coming in. Moritz Lerner, will he look to do the same in the Mercedes as he winds his way through there, and indeed he does. So doesn't want to go for the overcut by too much, and gets himself into the pits. Oh, that felt a little bit late. Just into that deceleration seemed to go a bit beyond that white line. We'll have to see if that's played into a stop-and-go penalty for Moritz Lerner. It'd be a disaster for the German driver if it has, but we will wait and see. Jacob Osterman barreling his way down towards 130R now. And we'll keep an eye, see where Luke Whitehead emerges. You'd have to presume it would be back in the race lead, but this undercut would have been going on for a little while now, so it could be close between them. And Jacob Osterman didn't have to spend too long fighting with George Boothby either. Luke Whitehead now getting himself underway out of the pit lane. Jacob Osterman making his way down the start-finish straight. Where's that Veloce Porsche? It's well clear of the rest of the field. No concerns for Luke Whitehead, and he will reclaim that race lead. A very solid 4.5 seconds between himself and the rest of those contenders. Niles has dropped a little bit away from the likes of Gronewald and Richter. We're hoping those fresh tyres will help him out. Tinko van der Velde and Utenavicius scrapping away. And Iemelo very close side by side with Vanty and Barry, and that 296 trying to go around the outside. He can't make that one stick, so Iemelo will hold on to that one. All about Lerner versus Statsenko. I can't click on them fast enough. Lerner is going to maintain that position. He slots in between the two ITB Racing McLarens, and I'm sure that we'll see some fights taking place between some of those cars in a moment. And I was right, Moritz Lerner has got himself a stop-go 30-second time penalty. It did look like he went in a bit hot. Just the braking zone, it just seemed to go a bit beyond that white line, and that is a major disappointment for the number 19 car. So unfortunate stuff there for Moritz, and those ITB Racing McLarens will start to come together to battle on track once again very, very shortly, as in actual fact Statsenko applying a lot of pressure to the Mercedes right now. Of course, he'll be able to see that penalty. He'll know that he doesn't really have to scrap away too much, but as a racing driver, you always want to earn every position you get on track and enjoy the fight in the process. Meanwhile, having more of a look through the penalties, we had a 5-second penalty for the number 37 car. That car belongs to Samuel Ratz further down the order. 10 seconds for number 28. That is Fideli. Number 26 has a 5-second time penalty. That belongs to... Where is the number 26 car in the server? That's Dennis Wietschorker that has had that one. Then we scroll down, no further actions. In actual fact, that is everything that's been dished out in this race so far. So the studio's been very busy since the start of this one, and I have a feeling with the way that some of those gaps are looking between those cars that it is going to be very much the same heading in towards the second phase of this race, because look at that, closing into this group, Max Frank, who's continued to move his way up through the order, once again trying to claim positions. He'll claim another one as adds of that freebie from Moritz Lerner, as Marco Bischoff trying to maybe set up a move towards turn 1. You can see him looking a little bit back and forth. Obviously, there was no gap to be exploring on the left-hand side of the circuit behind the Honda in front of him, but just showing his nose, filling up the mirrors of the Yeet Sports car and making sure that Marco Schada is aware that he is there. And when you have a two-time Pro Series champion in your rearview mirrors, I have no doubt that he is fully aware of that size of things, and will be trying to keep that Sprout Esports Lamborghini behind him as long as he can. 3.2 seconds the gap between Whitehead and Osman, so he did lose a little bit of lap time to Osman in the process, but of course has come out much fresher tyres and should be able to dial that pace in for the second phase of the race. But got to be careful, of course, with track limits to the end of this one, as it could still be a little bit dicey. Bischoff still absolutely glued to the rear. Does he send one up the inside? He sort of thinks about it. Schada has to go for a bit of middle of the road defending, and Bischoff unable to launch an attack on this occasion. We'll have to wait for another opportunity. Also, big thank you to everyone that has been following the channel so far during the stream. If you are enjoying the action that the Pro Series have to offer, then do consider following the channel and staying in tune with all of the amazing action this series has to offer. We're going into the final stages of this championship, and this sort of chaos, drama, and action-packed goodness is what you can expect from this series every single week. And we'll see how this one plays out today. Right now, it is looking good for Luke Whitehead at the front of the field to make it another victory so far this season. But of course, it still could go anyway in the closing stages. Bischoff climbing all over the curves in towards the Casio triangle. Absolutely rock climbing his way through there, jumping up and down, but unable to make a move stick and unable to really get close to the Honda. Has got such good straight line speed, and Lamborghini just cannot compete with that car on the exit there, especially with that line that he ended up taking. So they will continue to battle on. Not too far up ahead of them is the likes of Valentin Barrier and Aidan Warsiger. Meanwhile, Max Frank was looking pretty close to the Mac of Mikhail Statsenko, but just not quite in a position to make a move in the process of that. And let's see, who are our biggest winners so far in this field? We've actually got Santama and Luke Anderson gaining 12 positions apiece. 11 positions for Oliver Ferris as well, further down the order. And see what plays out for each of them. It's always a pretty fantastic, rewarding feeling when you do climb up a lot of positions in these races. Yellow flag for the number 19 car. And, excuse me, number 19, there it is. And that is Moritz Lerner, who I think... has he disappeared from existence? I do believe he has. I think, unfortunately, after the slight unfortunate misjudgments in the pit lane for him, I think he's decided to call it a day there. Disappointment there for the Mouse Esports driver. Was having a great return to the platform, but unfortunately that coming to an end. There's side by side between Anderson and Zach Duran, who sends it up the inside, putting the pressure onto the Genesis Esports Ferrari, although flashing of the lights there. Was there contact on the entry? I do want to try to check out on the replay, but Luke Anderson, flashing the lights away, making sure that he knows exactly how grumpy he is. With Zach Duran, he's going to send it straight back up the inside in towards Spoon Curve, and he's trying to make big contact. He sent him around entirely, and Luke Anderson goes from being potentially a victim of some contact to rather being the perpetrator on the inside of Spoon Curve. Not the first time we've seen contact there today. And not what we would have wanted to see there. And meanwhile, Vietschorker versus Mattia Meggs. Meggs maybe trying to go at the inside, has to back out of that one. So we'll try to see, because I think there's been a lot of scrapping over the course of the last lap. And what just happened to Marco Schade? Marco Schade has been off entirely. It's just kicking off up and down the order, left, right, and centre. We'll try to see if we can catch up with what's happened with a few of these cars then. So we've got Schade versus Bischoff in all of this action. See that? So Luke Anderson, his incident has already ended on that front. Through Casio Triangle, once again, you see how much tighter the inside line is. Just contact immediately on the exit. Bischoff he's trying to stay, I think, back for the Honda that he's ended up taking out of the race there, but he's got a kind of rear diffuser full of the McLaren of Lewis Rotors there. And then in the end, has had to just keep on going, but I imagine that he will be getting a penalty for that one soon. And we'll see what happens in terms of stewarding room, because it looked like Luke Anderson was kind of complaining. If he wasn't exactly doing Morse code with those headlights, but if he could, I'm pretty sure that he would have been expressing a great deal of displeasure towards Zach Duran, because it did look like that maybe complaining about some form of contact, and I think that was a response in aggression in towards Spoon Curve, and I think just unfortunately a bit of a misjudgment in towards that corner, but we didn't quite pick up how each incident played out, so stewards will have a lot more angles to be looking at and to review, and we'll see how that one plays out in the stewards room and what the decision from there is. Marco Schade trying to recover his way through the field, almost at the inside of Jan Drexler in the BMW. Can't make that one stick, and he'll have to wait for another opportunity, and that opportunity may have to wait for a little bit longer, because that was a bit of a wide line. In actual fact, may have given a bit of an opportunity to the South African of Cody Sherritter. He's gaining time. Hand over fist. Is he going to go to the inside before 130? He decides to back out of it, and we'll wait for another opportunity to come around. Meanwhile, battle for P3 heating up very, very quickly, because George Boothby unable to stick with the pace over the last few laps of Jacob Osterman and his teammate Luke Whitehead, as Korekis and Gronewold really starting to apply the pressure now. Yellow flag for the number 32 car. That is Vincent Proel, who I think has had another moment in towards Spoon Curve there. He's going to lose a position to Samuel Ratz in the process of the drama continuing on in this one. 20 minutes left to go. It just feels like it hasn't stopped in this one. It looks like he was battling with Dennis Vietschorker, who's already had a bit of a busy day. Oystein Brenham and Luke Anderson battling away as well. We'll check in on them in just a minute. Oh dear! And sent up the inside. That's rather unfortunate. And the pendulum effect really swinging back around on Proel's car there. And unfortunately, has ended up going around. Samuel Rat says, thank you very much. Carries the momentum out of Spoon Curve, and there's just in the end nothing that Pro L can do against that one. So unfortunate stuff there for Vincent, who's already had a little bit of a topsy-turvy time. But this is your battle heating up for P3 here. You can see Osterman has checked out a little bit away. Luke Whitehead on those fresh tyres. 57.9 on the last lap of the race. He is flying at the moment with that overcut strategy, and the gap now 6 seconds to Osterman. But Osterman 1.2 seconds clear of Boothby, but there's half a second apiece between Korekis and his teammate ahead of him, and then Tobias Grunewald in the number 22 car that sits in P5. We've got Stansenko and his teammate Lewis Roters battling for 14th place at the moment, with the pace very much being in favour of the number 31 car over the last couple of laps. So he could be looking to size up an opportunity over his teammate in due course. Max Frank hasn't been quite able to stick with the pace here. In actual fact, we could see a move sooner rather than later. You can see a little bit of damage still on board the German driver's car ahead, and gaining a lot of time in a straight line there. That is probably from aerodynamic efficiency, as Marco Bischoff has gone off at the exit Spoon Curve, comes kangarooing into shot there, side by side now, between the McLaren and Lamborghini, and Stansenko might be looking to take the pair of him. He takes evading action over his teammate there, trying to go down the inside, almost into the pit lane, and Marco Bischoff manages to maintain position for the time being, but Stansenko's through on his teammates, and will be looking to potentially dispatch of the number one man in the server as well. Lewis Roters under pressure from Max Frank, is trying to go all the way around the outside. Surely the Porsche can't do that from that distance, and he can't. But Marco Bischoff, what on earth happened to him? Through 130R they went, and in came to shot like a it sort of just sprung out of nowhere, didn't he? In towards the right hand side of the frame. And I could see the yellow flag taking place. I just didn't quite expect him to appear into view so quickly. But side by side, opportunistic driving from Statsenko and good spatial awareness from Roters as well to keep that gap just ever so slightly open on the exit, the Casio triangle. But Statsenko, who's been motoring along over the last couple of laps, trying to close the gap to his teammate, now finds himself positioned to try to pounce on perhaps a slightly unsettled Bischoff there. And we'll see how it plays out. Of course, the last lap from Marco wouldn't have been fantastically representative of his pace at this point in the race. We'll see what happens on this next lap, but Statsenko very much looking like he's applying the pressure. Same for Max Frank, as he is once again glued to the rear of Lewis Roters. Nat McLaren looks like he is really struggling in a straight line, because even the Porsche will do something about it. He's got the shorter line, going to head towards the outside line at Spoon Curve. Surely can't do that one all the way around the outside. Going to be squeezed out of him. Kick of oversteer in the mid part of the corner, as the early upshifts trying to keep the back of that car planted. Of course, with the TC0 meta that we are in, very crucial for these cars, and he's going to have to go around the outside again, and he's going to bump draft. Lewis Roters there doesn't want to go for the move there, but you can see Roters approaching 130R a lot quicker than normal. The pair of them having some issues. They're not used to taking that corner that fast. That is what bump drafting can do. Meanwhile, up ahead, Statsenko all the way around the outside of Marco Bischoff, and Bischoff has to relinquish the position. Statsenko, brave move around the outside. We'll have to go on board for a replay of that one, because that looked pretty mighty. You see, he was gaining in the slipstream, heading towards 130R. Marco Bischoff going to defend that inside line, and you see he had to get on the brakes on the exit. Got to be careful to not run too wide and get that track limit warning. And then as they went side by side through the complex, gets the power down. Fantastic racing between a pair of them. I think maybe a tiny bit of contact on the exit of the second apex, but I think really that looked like some pretty good, hard but fair racing between them. We'll see if the stewards have anything to say about that, but fantastic side-by-side action between them. We could see some side-by-side action between Max Frank and Lewis Roters once again in just a moment. And we'll see what the number 27 car can do as they fly through the first Degner once more. Fantastic shot. These GT3 cars, they might not have the downforce of something like your prototypes or Formula 1 or other single-seater categories, but they've still got a hefty amount on board, and they can take those corners very, very quickly, and they can take a lot of curb as well, which is quite exciting to the dynamics of those cars. 7.5 seconds now, the gap between Jacob Osterman and Luke Whitehead. I tell you what though, George Boothby bringing himself back into the fight with the podium positions, and he's bringing Korekis and Grunewald along with him as well, as now Max Frank having to go around the outside again, and there's contact on the entry into all Spoon Curve. And we'll have to see, will the stewards have anything to say about that one? I didn't quite see it initially as it took place. Let's see, we'll go on board for a replay then. So Max Frank using all of that torque of our naturally aspirated flat six to his advantage, forcing the defensive move pretty early on up the hill. That forces the McLaren to head towards that outside line sooner than he would have wanted. Sends one up the inside, and then we get towards Spoon Curve, in towards the entry, a little bit of contact in towards that part of the lap, and you see the rotors there ended up going deep in the process as well, so that's going to be an interesting one for the stewards to review. Meanwhile, it's getting very cozy for these top three positions, because whilst Luke Whitehead having time of his life, 8.1 seconds ahead of the rest of the field, Osterman really seeming to struggle now, losing 0.3 of a second, almost half a second in some of these cars every single lap, and he's got Boothby back on his tail. Korekas is with him as well, last week's winner, and Tobias Gronewold, who currently holds the fastest lap of the race. We did see a 57 from Luke Whitehead. He must have invalidated that somewhere in order for it not to count, so that Mercedes definitely looking quick as well. And Osterman's undercut maybe starting to find himself in a bit of a tricky spot at this phase of the race. And this is going to be a very interesting fight. Three McLarens, of course, they're all going to be very equally matched around this circuit. That Mercedes of Gronewold, watch out to see where he has the advantages. It's a torquey guy. He's got a big, bad, Brutus V8. Not sure I'm going to use that as an excuse just to go on board with this car as it thunders its way in towards Spoon Cove. It's a great sounding car. It's him scrambling away, trying to get the power down the exit spoon. They're the areas where he is likely to lose a bit of time. Trying to get the power down, it's going to be tricky, but in these flat-out sections, particularly on the run from the hairpin up, from the hairpin up towards Spoon Curve, that could be where he gains. Meanwhile, George Boothby locked in the slipstream of Jacob Osterman. Can't do anything about the ITB Racing McLaren just yet. Korekas, though, watching and waiting for an opportunity as well. What about Marco Schada versus Jan Drex of Honda, trying to recover his way up the order? Can't do so. Meanwhile, Vincent Proel, something's kicking off further down the order. Vincent Proel, I think, gained 2 positions over Samuel Ratz and Michael Frey, but I don't think I can look at the replay because we've got things kicking off between drivers. Gronewold around the outside of Granton Korekas, trying to hold in towards turn 2. It's side by side. I think he's going to get squeezed out on the exit, and Korekas does hold on, but there's one of your overtaking opportunities then for the Mercedes. The run from Casio Triangle towards turn 1, but Torque, the big bad V8, closing the gap and making a move potentially possible. Meanwhile, Loystein Brennan unable to make something stick in towards the Casio Triangle. Action still kicking off. There's just under 11 minutes of racing left to go. It's been chaos from start to finish, and I think it's going to close out in exactly the same way. But it really could go either way at the moment. Oystein Brenham in that BMW. Can he close the gap any further? It's very close. Looks toward that inside line at turn 1, but he can't get alongside the Ferrari, who of course will have some fantastic cornering capability on board that machine. And he does hold on to the position in the process. Meanwhile, that battling has allowed Boothby to just extend a little bit of breathing space ahead of his teammate Korekas, and really allow him to try to dial in the pressure onto Jacob Osterman. He needs these points. Whilst today, as it stands, won't close out the championship, every point matters. Luke Whitehead has been fantastically consistent, so has George Boothby, so any small advantage that they can get over their respective positions and points tallies could be pivotal. And whilst Luke Whitehead does look to be heading in towards 11 in a very confident spot, George Boothby could apply the pressure, but maybe not quite as intensely as this man is. Niels Narks on some of the freshest tyres of the bunch, trying to go around the outside of Bastian Richter, but he can't do that to the Mercedes, and he's got to be careful about Tinko van der Velde in the BMW behind. He can't do anything about it. What about Max Frank versus Lewis Roters? These two have already had some interesting moments. He is going to make the move, stick around the outside, but did he go off track in order to do it? Because it looked like a little bit of an ambitious racing line. I think he is going to hold on to the position as they get towards the Casio Triangle, so we will try to catch what happens between these two. It's been a busy old time, and he does get back towards that inside line on the climb up towards Spoon Curve. 10-second penalty for Marco Bischoff. We'll try to catch over the stewards' inquiries. Oh, and that's very much on the outskirts of the track. He'll say that he wasn't left any room, but Lewis Roters will say that he went off the track to make the move, which he very much did. And we'll have to see if the stewards have anything to say about that one. But they've definitely got their hands full, even towards the closing stages of this race, as we head back towards the fight for P6 between Bastian Richter, Niels Narks and Tinko van der Velde. Just 0.3 of a second between some of these drivers as Cody Sherritt and Marco Schade briefly swap positions between one another. I think in actual fact, did Cody Sherritt get the move done? Not sure. What about Moisine Brennan? Moisine Brennan does get the move done. We'll try to go back on the replay. We're jostling up and down the order every time and trying to see what took place between some of these cars. Cody Sherritt, I think, did get the move done here, so we'll try to catch up with what happened with both of the Genesis Esports car. Is Marco Schade going to make a mistake in towards turn 1 and 2? And the answer is yes. Turn 2 gets a little bit of a slide, big slide in actual fact, and they end up swapping around. And then for Luke Addison, he was side by side with Moisine Brennan. I think he's going to outbrake himself in towards next turn. Does he? Oh no, a little bit of contact between the BMW and the Ferrari, and that's what caused those two to swap around and swap positions. As looking back up towards the pointy end of the grid, just about 4 laps left of racing to go, I do believe. Luke Whitehead 10 seconds clear of the rest of the field. But Osterman, Boothby, Korekas, Grunewald all separated by an absolute hair at the moment. We'll try to check in on the stewards' inquiries. There you can see the other trailing pack of Richter Narks and Tinko van der Velde, so they're really not too far out of it. If all things kick off in this pack for the podium positions, we can see, oh, Lord only knows what, in the closing laps. We've seen it all kick off. Donington Park was a perfect example of that. You couldn't call that one until the very last corner. Luke Addison gained about 5 positions in the last 2 corners. Now we could see something similar happening today. Yellow flag for Santama. Maybe had a bit of a moment through 130R. Nothing too dramatic, though, for the McLaren driver. And he is able to continue going from there. Meanwhile, we have a 10-second time penalty for the number 16 car as white flag fallen for Ferrers. I think he may have had a bit of an incident, has dropped away. He's dropped 2 positions in the process. Not quite sure what happened to him, but I'm a bit nervous about darting away from any of these fights because we could see a launch on the inside any second from Niels Narks in towards a hairpin. Does he look down the inside? He doesn't. And the Mercedes holds on for now. And watch that Mercedes very likely start to run away as they climb the hill. We'll go on board with the Aston Martin. Another beautiful sounding cars. Those gear shifts like gunshots firing their way through the gears up into 5th, almost into 6th by the time we get to Spoon Curve. But Bastian Richter has the torque and grunts necessary to keep that Aston Martin at bay. But that ultimate straight line speed, particularly end of straight, will be pretty handy on board this number 6 car, I imagine, because he should be able to go away with a little bit less aero on board this car. George Boothby within a couple of tenths of a second. You see Niels pulling out the slipstream, partly showing his mirrors to the Mercedes driver, but also trying to make sure that he doesn't get too close through that sequence of corners because it's a tricky one. George Boothby trying to set up a run out of Casio Triangle. Can't make that one stick. 10-second time penalty for Marco Bischoff. That was one we were talking about earlier. Number 26 car has a 10-second time penalty as well. That car belongs to, as you see, trying to show themselves in the mirrors once more, but unable to make any opportunities happen at this phase of the race. That's Dennis Wietstalker that got a 10-second time penalty. We've got a 5-second penalty for the number 15 car. That is Lewis Roters. And that is everything as it stands at the moment from the stewards. So, interesting one. Yellow flag for the number 23 car. Briefly, that's Santama again, not having a fun time through 130R. So, maybe just running into a little bit of balance issues through that part of the circuit. Such a high commitment section of this Suzuka track layout. As Roters, Osterman, Boothby, Korekas, Grunewald still scrapping away for those other podium positions. Luke Whitehead 11 seconds clear of the grid. He hasn't been on camera very much this evening as Zach Duran comes into the pits now. I wonder if he's had some form of penalty. Has decided to call it a day. Disappointment for him. Meanwhile, look at this pack of cars fighting their way in these last couple of laps. I think when Luke Whitehead next crosses the line, we will have 2 laps remaining, so not many opportunities left for drivers to try to get themselves further up the order. And George Boothby, he'll want that P2 at the very least to give himself the best opportunity that he can in order to take the championship down to the wire with his Veloce teammate. But Luke White has been looking formidable this season and is trying to close out yet another victory from this one. Looking at the course of the season, He's been by far the winningest driver so far. He has already taken 3 victories, a third of the number of rounds that we have had this season, and he may be looking to take a 4th one today. And Jacob Osterman feeling the pressure, trying to break that toe, heading towards turn 1. But I don't think George Boothby's going to be quite close enough as they barrel on down towards the entry once more. In actual fact, we'll go on board with the British driver. He's taken more race victories in the Pro Series than anyone. It won't be another win for him today, but he's trying to at least make sure it's a P2 and minimise the loss to his teammate in the number 3 that sits 11 seconds clear of the ITB Racing McLaren that is in front of him at the moment. Any opportunity. Dunlop curve, you can see Osterman just struggling seemingly a little bit with understeer through that opening sequence of corners. Now in towards the first Degner. Half a second now the gap between the ITB Racing car and the Veloce McLaren. He's got to be careful of Korekis, his teammate, and Gronewell looming behind because we look to the rear diffuser of George Boothby. You can see very close to the back of his car, and any opportunity, any mistake that Boothby makes grants Korekis and Gronewell will be looking to pounce. Meanwhile, Knox versus Richter. Tinko van der Velde has dropped away out of this fight over the last couple of laps and hasn't been able to close the gap. So it looks like it will be a showdown between the 2 German drivers for that 6th place in these last couple of laps, but it does look like maybe that grip advantage that was helping Knox to apply the pressure has been extinguished, although Tobias Gronewald in this Mercedes, you see, he gets close down the back straight. That's a mistake from Grant Korekis. Is this the opportunity that Gronewald needs? Trying to launch an attack down the inside. Aggressive braking from Korekis. He goes a little bit deep, and this may give the opportunity on the final lap of the race. You heard the call from the engineer, Luke Whitehead, leading the way. And now, towards the inside line, he has to go defensive. George Boothby unable to get alongside Jacob Osterman. He's trying to apply the pressure, but he's nowhere near as much pressure as Korekis is under. As Tobias Gronewald tries to go around the outside, he gets a face for the McLaren on the entry towards turn 1. And in towards turn 2 he goes, but the McLaren holds on strong. Korekis keeping P4 as it stands. And Gronewald, he'll have to try to size up another opportunity, but he's running out of places in order to make a move stick. Surely his next opportunity will be out of the hairpin. Yellow flag and a white flag for Santamaria again. Not sure, really struggling with that section of the circuit. As George Boothby trying to see if he can do anything about Osterman, that undercut. It looks like in the second phase of the race, the pace advantage has been firmly with the British driver, but track position proving key just as it did in the first stint of this race. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to get the ITB Racing driver, as Gronewald can't send one down the inside at the hairpin, but can he get to the exit that he would be dreaming of? Bastian Richter, Niels Nark still very close together, battling for P6 in the background. As Luke Whitehead, 12 seconds clear of the rest of the field. He's making his way out of Spoon Curve and will make sure that he has been truly commended for this incredible drive once he gets to the finish line. But we need to keep an eye on these final scraps for the podium positions. It's close between some of these drivers, but I don't know if it's close enough. Giovanni Porzio has made a bit of a mistake, I think, although I do believe he may have been simply letting this man through. It's been a dominant display for the number 3 driver. Luke Whitehead, your championship leader, drives Suzuka in style and takes a 4th victory of the season and dominates the rest of the grid. 12 seconds the margin by the end of that one. George Boothby is going to go down to the wire between himself and Jacob Osterman. A wide exit for Osterman, but I don't think George Boothby is quite going to get him. He's going to drag race him towards the line, but he's going to run out of grip, run out of time, and the number 2 car will have to finish in P3. Korekis holds on to P4. What about the fight for P6? It was Richter, Niox, and Tinko van der Velde that closed out those spots, but further down the order, it's not done just yet. If you ever wanted a reason to explore the world of LFM, this race and every race in the Pro Series showcases it doesn't matter where you are on the grid, there is action up and down the order. And the likes of Marco Schade as well. Santamaria again bringing out the yellow flag. Marco Schada trying to scrap away himself, but I don't think he was able to do anything about the positions he was scrapping for in the end. Dramatic race for him. We'll have to see if there's any additional stewards inquiries by the end of this one as well. Lomar, I don't think we'll be able to do anything about Antonio Fedeli. And we'll see where some of his drivers filter out after post-race penalties. It looks like the closest fight towards the end. In actual fact, Samuel Ratz, just a little bit further up the order, may be able to make an opportunity happen on Vincent Proel. Not like that, he won't. Bad entry in toward 130. Almost disaster at the end. Meanwhile, side by side, brave around the outside from Matthew Mix in towards 130. Can't make it stick. And it's defensive from Jonathan Clifford. Will there be a dive bomb towards the inside? Defense from the American driver into the Casio triangle. Can he hold on for just a couple more corners? A better exit for the number 29. Can he get the power down soon enough? I don't think he's going to be able to. So Jonathan Clifford will round out 31st place and the last of our big fights in this grid. Matthew Mex takes 32nd. As drivers will continue to cross the line. Claudius Lutzek coming to the line in the BMW P34 for him. And we will run through the race results very shortly. And that is indeed the end of that one. My goodness, what a dramatic race from start to finish. I told you that the Pro Series delivers incredible racing every single week, and this was no difference. The margin between Boothby and Osman at the end, just a single tenth of a second. And whilst the championship has not been decided today, it has very much been put in place of the Luke Whitehead trying to close this one out in style, taking a 4th victory of the season. Hopefully, we may be able to speak to him very shortly. And we'll see if we can grab him for a post-race interview. But I imagine that's going to be a very happy man inside the cockpit of that Porsche. But scrapping all the way from start to finish in that race. And P18 for Marco Bischoff on track in the end. We'll see if there's any additional post-race penalties, all sorts that will be coming through in that one. Because Stewart's had about as much of a busy time, I think, as I did here in the cockpit. They, of course, doing wondrous amounts of work. And I think, it's times like this, once again, highlighting, the immense amount of work that goes on behind the scenes for all of the people that make this happen. The stewarding team, all of you in the community that have put so much effort into this custom bop, that have delivered this sort of incredible racing, and also all of those that make the wonderful world of LFM possible. And once again, showcasing an extremely epic race amongst this grid, but a man that dominated the entire grid from start to finish. It was a incredible lap for pole position and just dominant performance from the very start of the race. Luke Whitehead, a 4th victory of the season for you. How are you feeling after that one?
Yeah, well, first off, as I always say, good evening everyone, hope you're all doing well. Yeah, it was a perfect race really, helped by a car that was stupidly fast really. My performances weren't really perfect in any session, but they were enough to be quick, and the car really helped with that. So, as much as I feel like I performed good in the race and my quality was okay, it's largely down to the car. But again, still a very crucial one for the championship. Makes my job in the last 2 races much easier at tracks that I kind of struggled at in general. So, yeah, a good result today for sure.
Absolutely, with that shout out. The Porsche, we kind of had some hints and inklings that that car might be a very strong package around here at Suzuka. But, it's one thing to have that performance underneath you in the car. You need to be able to deliver it, and it's not an easy circuit to do that consistently at the pace that you were doing lap after lap. Obviously, I think one element that kind of really played into effect here as well was strategy. And that opening stint from you, I think, was really crucial. Getting that margin over your teammates so that you could kind of play around with the strategy. Was it always kind of the game plan to go for that sort of overcut second half of the race strat if you got that opening gap, or were you kind of making those judgments on the fly as you went throughout the course of that race?
Yeah, so I knew, obviously, the drop-off would be very heavy towards the end of the stint, particularly in the second stint, as it always is in LFM. So I was kind of, I knew I had the pace in the car to go a little bit longer in the first stint and not get overcut. And obviously the pace in myself as well, the consistency to keep the pace when the tyres dropped. And yeah, obviously, Jakob gained a lot when he undercut, and obviously gained a place, I think, and gained a couple of seconds on myself. And then, obviously, he had really heavy tyre drop at the end, which is exactly as I predicted. And we had heavy-ish drop-off, but it wasn't as heavy as his. So yeah, the overcut was just a no-brainer from my side. I knew that we'd have pace to push and plenty of flexibility. And yeah, as I say, the strategy it suited my situation perfectly. So yeah, very happy with that side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, your 4th victory of the season. Incredible tally from you so far. Unfortunately, you don't quite have enough races left to go one better than the previous record of 6 race wins, which would be Tinko and Grantis's, your teammates' record on each of their championship winning seasons. But you still have the opportunity to tie those records. And those next 2 tracks coming up, Monza and Watkins Glen, how are you feeling about the Porsche closing out the season there? I have a feeling maybe one of those you might be marginally more optimistic about than the other.
Oh, I mean, honestly, it's I've had the luxury of having quite a few strong tracks this season. Like the 4 wins that I've had are probably my 4 strongest tracks. Probably the one missing from that tally is Brands Hatch. Really wished it was on the calendar, but obviously this one as well is probably my full-on strongest track in ACC. So for the next 2 tracks being amongst my weakest is a bit nerve-wracking. And as for the car's performance, I really don't know. Obviously, I know that people are going to want to get the car bopped after this race in particular, which is a little bit unfortunate. But, there's other cars as well that are definitely on that target list. And the McLaren looks very quick at Monza. And Watkins, can be anything really. I think Watkins actually looks pretty open-ended. But I'm excited for the challenge regardless. We're in a good position after a strong season so far, so just need to stay consistent. And, as I say, like, it doesn't matter if I'm not on the podium. It doesn't matter if I'm not up the front. As long as I'm, top 7, top 8 in both the next 2 races, we should be safe. So it's just, not taking any risks, keeping the ground, and obviously not, making any silly mistakes and keeping consistent. That's the priority now for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You've done the hard work in the opening 10 rounds. Now it's a case of trying to consolidate that position in the last couple. So we'll see how it all plays out for you. I imagine that there are going to be some very busy rounds and have as much excitement and drama as we would get treated to in the Pro Series. So big congratulations to you, Luke, on a 4th victory of the season. And thank you once again for coming into an interview. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And we shall see you again next week at Monza.
Have a good one, mate. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care, Luke. Great stuff then to talk to our race winner and extending championship leader today after another mighty drive from the Veloce Porsche driver. Exceptional stuff from him, and also pivotal stuff as well. George Boothby. It won't be the biggest of difference makers in this championship, but like I say, every point can. We've had performances in this series go down to the very last moment of the very last race. So P2 versus P3 might right now not look like the biggest of differences, but it could be a very important aspect as we head into the last phase of this championship. And having a look through our results from today, Luke Whitehead then taking victory ahead of Austin and Boothby, Karekas, Grunewald, Richter, Narks, Tinko van der Velde, and then Uknavicius and Iemelo rounding out the top 10. Barrio, Walsingham, Statsenko, Frank, and Drexler seeing away to the end of the top 15, with Max Frank, I think, being our biggest mover in the grid, alongside with Santama, and excuse me, Oliver Ferrer's actually taking that claim. 13 positions for him. Those rotors, Sherratt, Bischoff, P18 in the end with Sharda, Shaber, Santama, Brenham, Jardier, Ferrers, Longmire, Fideli, Addison, Vitshalka, Proel, and Rats towards the end of the top 30. And then your last 10, Clifford, Mex, Frey, Luchek, Porzio, and Duran. And then your DNS for the day, Lerner, Ida, Tarek Adam, and Mattia De Campo in those closing stages. So disappointment for some of those drivers, but courageous as well for those that kept on pushing on all the way to the end, because sometimes when it does all go wrong, it's very easy to just pull into the pits and put the wheel down for the evening, and it can be rewarding in the end. Even when you think all hope is lost, sometimes those extra few points that you can gain can very much keep you in the mix for some fantastic stuff in the closing stages of the season. So another incredible evening of action brought by the Case King Pro Series once again. And like I say, we will be heading to Monza for round number 11. 60 minutes of action will be taking place there, same time, same place next week. So be sure not to miss that one, because if you have enjoyed the action from this evening's race, do consider following the channel. Big thank you to all of those and all of the new viewers that we've had this season. A big warm welcome to all of you, and thank you once again for the incredible continued support on the channel. Maybe we can even nudge over 1,100 followers by the end of the year. What a fantastic achievement that would be in just a few months of being here over on Twitch. And if you fancy getting involved in the racing action yourself and having a shot at some lovely, incredible prizes from our wonderful sponsors, then do head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com, get yourself signed up and get yourself a license, and you can work your way up through the ranks, compete with some of these incredible names that you've seen on the screen this evening, and be treated to some adrenaline-fueled action and sim racing goodness. And of course, as well as the likes of the Case King Pro Series, many other championships, the Endurance Series, the daily racing, all of that good stuff that you can look to get involved in. And of course, there is also R Factor 2 on the platform as well if you fancy something a bit different. We've got the WRC hosted on the platform as well, so you can compete against one another in some rallying stuff as well. And of course, the new arrival of the alpha stage of Assetto Corsa, which has been going down incredibly well so far. I've seen MX5 chaos left, right, and centre. That's typically how that racing plays out in real life. It's great to see that in the world of sim racing, it's exactly the same thing. So if you fancy helping us build that platform and getting that continuously in place, then do also consider contributing to all of that, because not only will you have a great deal of fun, I am sure, but also all of your help is much appreciated, and we can continue to grow this platform even more and welcome even more of you into this ever-growing community, and could potentially even have some pretty fun things in the world of AC in the future. Of course, a lot of opportunities of racing to explore on that front. And if you just want to be a part of this community in general and make some new friends, share all wonderful things sim racing and real racing, or just send a picture of your dog from time to time, then you can also join the Discord server as well. Wonderful to have as many of you in there as possible. I think we have over 125,000 of you on the LFM platform, which is just absolutely incredible. It feels like yesterday we were celebrating 100k in the world of LFM, so incredible to have so many of you joining us and continuing to be a part of this wonderful thing. So thank you everybody so much for watching. Tune in next week for all the action at Monza, where we see the Case King Pro Series go to round 11 and potentially the first opportunity for Luke Whitehead to close out the championship. We'll have to see if it will go down at the final circuit of the year at Watkins Glen, or can he get the job done early? One way or another, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic, dramatic, and all the action and drama that you could possibly want, so do not miss it. So thank you everybody so much for watching then, but until next time then, it's goodbye.